In the forest, an elk was walking, gently pacing the pine needle paths through the rich, deep quiet. He came to the sunlit grounds of a grand castle. The gardens were beautiful. There were roses and sunflowers and sweet peas. There were blossoming apple, pear and cherry trees, all neat, perfect and lovely. The borders were carefully weeded and the grass was cut. In a meadow full of wildflowers sat a young girl in a long white silk dress. She was picking goldenrod, meadowsweet, buttercup, her hair like finely spun sunlight. She wore a necklace with a little heart locket. She looked up. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am Elk," he replied. "Yes, I've seen you in my picture books. You are big and strong." "Who are you?" he asked. She picked up a small crown and placed it on her head. "I am Princess Cottongrass. I live here with my mother and father, the king and the queen." The elk lowered his antlers. "You have a crown just like me," she said. She stood and stroked his bowed head. "I want to see the forest. Please, take me with you." "The world is big and cold. You are small. It will hurt you," said the elk. "I am young and warm. I have enough warmth for everyone." "The forest is dark and dangerous. You'll look after me. I trust you." She pulled herself up onto the elk's broad back. She was as light as a feather. He sighed heavily and trod carefully through the meadow and over the perfect lawns. "Hold on to my antlers with both your hands and don't let go," he said. The princess squealed with delight and held on tight. The elk stepped back into his forest. Beech, birch, pine, spruce, damp moss, green boulders, shadowy paths, and mosquitoes. She didn't care. She was free. It was darker now. The canopy was thicker, the sky distant. In the shadows, the princess saw movement. Creatures, stamping, spinning, swirling, tumbling. "Who are they?" she asked. "Don't speak to them. Hold on to my antlers and don't let go." But the dancing ones came closer, weaving in between the elk's legs, tugging at her dress and long hair. She was horrified and fascinated. As she peered down, she let go of the elk's antlers with one hand. Her little crown slipped from her head, and they caught it. Shrieking and laughing, they danced away into the darkness. The princess wept. "My precious crown!" "Be glad it wasn't worse," said the elk. The princess couldn't imagine anything worse than losing her crown. The moon rose. "I'm tired," said the princess. The elk stopped, and she slipped off his back. She took off her dress and lay down to sleep. The elk watched over her all night. In the morning, she thought, "I must protect my dress." She climbed onto the elk's back and carefully hung the dress in his antlers. They continued their journey through the forest. In the shadows, where the moss-covered branches were like long green arms, she saw a face watching her smiling. "Who's that?" "Don't speak," said the elk. "Just hold on tight." The smiling face came closer, singing and sighing. The princess felt her eyelids grow heavy. Her hands slipped from the antlers. Gnarled green fingers reached up and snatched her dress. The princess tried to grab it, but it was gone. "My dress," she sobbed. "Be glad it wasn't worse," said the elk. The princess couldn't imagine anything worse than losing her dress. They carried on through the forest. The elk lifted his head. There was a smell in the air. The elk moved faster now, up onto a hillock, looking out across the forest, sniffing. The smell was familiar but strange. His coat felt damp. His legs trembled. He was filled with the urge to do battle and not be alone. The elk ran, and the princess held on, until they reached a lake. Here he slowed. "It's so beautiful," she said. She leant over, peering into the water, and let go of the elk's antlers. Her heart-shaped necklace slipped and fell with a splash into the water. "No, my precious necklace." "Be glad it wasn't worse." "That was all I had left." "Just hold on," said the elk. But the princess couldn't hold on. She fell to the ground and stared into the fading ripples. She didn't hear the elk telling her to climb back up, that they must move on. She sat there, rooted to the earth and the moss beneath her. All day the elk nudged her, pushed her, paced back and forth, stamped and snorted, but she wouldn't move. She couldn't move. When night came, the elk couldn't ignore that smell, that longing anymore. He gently stroked the girl's head with his nose, breathed warm, soft breath against her neck, and then turned and followed his calling. The summer passed. Autumn came, and then the winter ice, and then the thawing of spring, and then the summer. The elk came back to the lake. The princess was still at the water's edge. She wasn't a girl anymore, but a slender stalk crowned with white cotton. The princess bowed her head at her old friend the elk, and he bowed his head in return. And there she remains to this very day, looking for something lost, never to be found.